Farmers today are facing rising costs, volatile markets, and extreme weather. The A Better Way to Farm podcast digs into strategies to help you take control of farm inputs and maximize profit so your farm can thrive for generations. Remember to take advantage of our free resources at abetterwaytofarm.com. Now, from America's Heartland, here's your host.
Welcome to today's episode. This is Rod here at A Better Way to Farm, where we improve yields and increase profits. Guys, we're excited to have you tune in today to this episode of the podcast. We're super excited to talk about this subject. I'm really lucky today because my co-host is going to be doing the lion's share of this, and I appreciate him very much. He does such a great job with helping with our podcast, and he has researched on this study, and it's kind of a burner right now within the industry. It's very timely. And hopefully there's going to be some information here that will help you navigate through a big change that's coming in American agriculture. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you my co-host, my good friend, Mr. Tyler Hull. Tyler, thanks for helping me out today.
Yeah, absolutely, Rod. I was excited about doing this podcast with you. You know, it's something that we talk a lot about fertility and nutrients, micronutrients, and we kind of go down that route. Do a lot of interviews with clients that we've worked with over the years, and all that's fantastic. But there are some times when news breaks that we've got to sit down and we've got to talk about that breaking news. And I love the fact that you mentioned that this is going to be a real burner of an episode, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is not only the EPA coming out and kind of re-regulating dicamba, but I also wanted to talk about a new herbicide that BASF just released, and it always drives me nuts. You know, my background comes from the co-op where I dealt chemistries, and then I used to retail chemicals when I left that world, and I thought I had a fairly good understanding about new chemicals. And the crazy thing is that there's no new chemistries. There's just different ways that they mix chemistries. So BASF releases this new herbicide shortly after the announcement that dicamba can no longer be used in the way in which we used to use it. And we'll get to that in a second. But this new herbicide is Sertan, I think is probably how you say it. So immediately I start reading the article from Successful Farming, and they talk about how they're taking this group 14 herbicide and this group 15 herbicide, mixing it together. And this is from BASF, quotes from BASF, making a solid encapsulated post-emerge herbicide. You can use it all the way, pre-emerge, all the way up to, Rod, get this, all the way up to V3 corn is the time in which you can use it. And when you talk about burners, one of the products is in there is a group 14 herbicide, which is what we affectionately love to call burners. So I thought it was interesting that you brought that up. So then I start to do my research, and I'd highly recommend, if you have not went to Google and Google searched a herbicide classification chart. Many universities came together years ago and developed this herbicide classification chart. You have got to download that for yourself. Do not do it for me. Don't do it for Rod. Do it for yourself. Get access to that herbicide classification chart and understand what is on there. As I went through that chart, I looked at, okay, I already know group 14 herbicides and group 15 herbicides have been mixed together for years and years and years. I happened to notice that one of the products was Zidua. I happened to be standing next to a client of ours, a grower of ours, and he goes, "Oh, I love Zidua." And I said, yeah, so BASF has released basically a new formulation between Zidua and Zidua Pro. They actually pulled out a chemistry. So instead of being 3-group herbicides, now it's only a 2-group herbicide mix, but they have now solid encapsulated. So there are a few things there that absolutely drive me nuts. The first thing is that they come out and they say, hey, we got this new latest and greatest herbicide. You ought to do it on your acres. It works fantastically. Then they come out and they say it's solid encapsulated. So to me, when you solid encapsulate something, what we know very well is urea. There's ESN, which is polycoated or solid coated urea. So my question is, are they now taking a herbicide because they don't want this burner specifically to damage leaf tissue on some of these crops? They're solid encapsulating it. What's going to happen in a year where we have drier weather? I think some people call it a drought. It's been many years since we've had to work through a drought.
Right. Or about 180 days. I've heard it both ways. Go ahead.
Right. Right. And I think you say in Southeast Iowa, you're like, what, 7 days from a drought or
10.
all the way to 10.
Give me a little credit here.
That's right. You guys have got some snow this winter. I totally forgot.
Yeah.
So I highly, highly suggest as you go talk to your chemical guys and gals, is that you just ask the question, why? Don't say, yeah, sure, here's my checkbook, here's my money. Say, why? Why is that? Why are we looking at this new herbicide? And then when you figure out that it's just a concoction of an old herbicide that you've probably already used, they just kind of reformulated it a little bit and kind of changed it a little bit. Why are you using it? That's kind of my biggest question. So watch out for that. But that leads us into this whole discussion with dicamba. On February 16th, the government comes out and they say, hey, look, we realize now that the EPA did not do their due diligence. They actually came out and they said this in quotations. The EPA substantially failed entirely to acknowledge other risks of applying dicamba post-emerge to cotton, corn, soybeans. And so this ruling basically shut down all of this new Ingenia, XtendiMax, the Fexapan, all of these herbicides that growers have already paid for. And that was the two main questions. Well, now what are we going to do? And now what are we going to do? Because I got it sitting in my shed. That was pretty eye-opening and pretty scary. And I know that we've done a little bit on social media, just kind of real quick snippets about that particular situation. But saving grace on Valentine's Day, Rod, the EPA gifted us with something out of love. They issued an existing stock order that basically says, good news for those of you that purchased it and then shipped it. We talk a lot about getting it bought, getting it shipped. Is it 9/10 or should we just call it 10/10 now of possession is law, right? So getting it in your shop is going to pay big dividends for the use of this product. So the good news is that, yes, if you bought it and it is in your warehouse, you get to keep it and you get to use it. But there's still a huge question. What do we do next?
I think that one of the things, Tyler, I want to backtrack. You talked about asking why. I had a great conversation with Greg yesterday from over in Illinois. And, our goal here, guys, we're in business. We market products every day. But the purpose of our social media presence is to bring value to you guys and to help you to make better decisions, whether or not you ever talk to us. And Greg and I were talking about how many times someone should ask why. And here's what I know, Tyler. If I'm coming to you and I'm going to give you $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, I should have the right to ask you why I'm doing that.
Yep.
And this industry has not always embraced that. As a matter of fact, some of the retailers get a little ouchy when you say, why am I doing that?
Yes.
I don't want questions. And I think in regards to this, I want to go back a little bit there. You talked about they're adding a group 14. I've ran across a couple of retailers in the past 12 months, and they just immediately take guys to a group 14 chemical plant.
Yep.
And those burners are, man, they're hard on the beans.
Yeah.
And I'm okay if that's what it takes. But before we finish up, I'm not going to do it right now, but before we finish up, Tyler, I want to talk about how maybe we can take a softer chemistry and still succeed in killing our weeds and get along with this. But we are probably we're standing on the edge, I would guess, of the end of dicamba as we know it. So for this year, guys, if you did what we suggest, you got it bought, you put it in your shed, the EPA gave you a Valentine's Day present, you got it, you can use it, yes. Thankfully. So we have about 15 months to figure out what we're going to do in 25. If you didn't have it in your shed, you've got about 90 days to figure out what you're going to do. Right. And I don't want I want to put the fears to ease because I believe we can navigate through this.
Oh, 100%.
Don't you think, Tyler?
Oh, 100%.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we don't talk about often enough is the fact that we have a very strong adjuvant lineup. And when you look at adjuvants as it relates to your herbicide mixes, honestly, that is what is allowing or not allowing that herbicide to work through that plant. These herbicides absolutely work. The resistance is not necessarily built up in the plant tissue, in the actual plant cell of these plants. It's built up through, a stronger cuticle layer, these waxy layers that this plant is kind of building up these resistance. That's how we build up resistance even in our own bodies, become bigger, faster, stronger. And that's how we progress throughout the years. So using adjuvants that, again, I'm going to bring up the 4Rs, go back to using the right sources, using some of these right sources and not just buying, I'm buying the chemicals from you. So now whatever adjuvants you sell, go ahead and load me up with that stuff. Doing the research, getting the ones that actually work is absolutely vital to the success of your herbicide spray. We were just in Lincoln, Nebraska at one of our 2-day fundamentals of agronomy meetings and talked with a grower, and he said, man, I just cannot get my Liberty herbicide to activate and to work. Oddly enough, or coincidentally, we happen to be standing right by a gentleman that has had great success using our system, including the adjuvants, to get his Liberty to work on things like palmer-amaranth, water hemp. And I know that as you listen to this, you are probably not affected by these resistance weed, Johnson grass. None of that stuff is affecting you that's listening to this. It just affects the neighbor down the road or someone else.
Listen and pay attention here. You can go over and help your neighbor out. Look like a really good guy. So,
right.
So we're gonna give you that power here.
Yes. But I know that your daughter, and I don't know if you want to talk about it or if you want me to talk about it, but your daughter Kayla actually did a study on one of our 100% non-ionic surfactants. A lot of people have an 80-20 blend or a 90-10 blend non-ionic surfactant. Ours that we use is actually 100%.
Yeah, it's funny because, and I think one of the things that we make a mistake in a surfactant line, Tyler, is that we just want to do one. We want to keep it easy. We're looking for that easy button from Staples. And I tell everybody good and easy are not brothers. They're really not even cousins. And so sometimes we have to do that thing. I quote S. Truett Cathy. He said, thinking is hard work. That's why most people won't do it. We're going to have to do some thinking. And the fact is, we have a tremendous pre-emerge surfactant.
Yep.
All right. And then we have a tremendous post-emerge surfactant, but they're different. And so we've got to think about what we're going to do.
Yep.
And I think, Tyler, before I do to the surfactants, I want to talk about some other things that are in that surfactant line, but they're not. Because in my estimation, two of the big problems actually, are number one, we don't address pH.
Right.
And we don't address minerals in the water.
Yeah.
So before I talk about the surfactant Kayla's experiment, why don't you talk about how it is? I'll ask you this. So number one, I believe we need to sequester the minerals. Do you agree with that?
100%.
And so what would you use to sequester those minerals? Are you looking for an ammonium sulfate?
Yes. So that is literally why we use AMS in our herbicide sprays. You use ammonium sulfate to sequester those minerals that you're talking about, because those hard water salts, hard water minerals do not do you any justice when you're out spraying your herbicide. What's going to happen is herbicide is going to tie up with the minerals, and then all of a sudden the herbicide that you just paid all that money for no longer work. So research was done, said, yep, we need high grade ammonium sulfate in that tank, anywhere from roughly, Rod, from anywhere in the United States, 8.5 to 17 pounds. The best part is that it's per 100 gallon, but they come in 51-pound bags. That's what I love, is that it's not a 50-pound bag, but I was told that if you do, I can't remember if it's based off of 15 gallons per acre, whatever it is, it's like, oh, well, it's based off of this. So you have a 51-pound bag of AMS. And one of the things that we love about dry AMS is that there's nothing better than going to the chem shed and having the pallet of AMS that's been sitting in the humidity all summer long, ripping off the plastic wrap and grabbing that nice, supple, soft, flexible bag of dry AMS. Maybe that's a lie. Maybe that bag of AMS is now turned into a brick.
Exactly. And the crazy part is I get people say, well, we use AMS because it's a burner. We use AMS because it's a sticker. We blah, blah, blah. None of that is true. The number one function that AMS has is to sequester those minerals. And the thing that I like is I like to find a good high quality liquid, because I don't like running them blocks through my sprayer. That's the bottom line. And we have a Hagee at home, and my goal is to never carry anything up there that weighs 51 pounds and looks like a salt block. So that being said, let's go to the importance of pH. Typically, what is the right pH to spray chemicals off? What should the pH of the water be?
Generally, you're looking at around a 6.5 to even a 6. A lot of the herbicides, Roundup even calls for a 6 pH in order to get that product to work effectively. Preston, a couple years ago, Preston even found a pesticide, a known pesticide that we all use even today, that had a half-life of 15 minutes if the pH of the water was just above 8 pH.
Wow.
We test water in these meetings that we do. It's one of the demos that we do. We always test the water. Generally, the water is above 8 pH. Most of the time, it's significantly higher than an 8 pH. And if you think about those 15-minute half-lives, you're mixing the load, and it already is now half effective as you get out to go spray it. You make that first pass around there, and now all of a sudden you're down to a quarter.
Absolutely. And quite honestly, well water actually can tend to be a little bit higher, but city water tends to have, we just don't find water hardly. I don't know if last time I saw water below 8. Most of it's 8.5, 9.5.
Yep.
So, and let me say this, the sulfonylureas need to be sprayed off at 7. Everything else we see comes in, read the label, guys.
Yep.
It comes in at somewhere between 6 and 6.5. So the question is, Tyler, how are we going to fix that pH? How are we going to get that how do we get it to go down to 6? More importantly, how do we get it to stay down at 6?
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because again, we have another product in our Adjuvant lineup that will not only acidify the solution, but it'll also buffer it. So we look at this product. It is not citric acid. There's a lot of citric acid products out on the market, and what they do is they pull it down, but the citric acid won't buffer it and hold it there. It'll just, in minutes, it'll go back up to the solution of that product. So we have this acidifier that will pull it down, and then it'll maintain that. And a lot of people say, well, how long does it last? And to me, if you're mixing chemicals, that shouldn't be the first question on your mind. I want to mix this batch of chemicals up so it'll sit in my shed for 4 months. That's not ideal. Mix your chemicals up just in time as you go out and you spray them off. So I'm trying to think, it was this year at one of the programs, Brian, who was a client, is now a part of the team. Brian says, hey, call on me, pick on me. And I'm like, all right, Brian, what's the deal? And he goes, I just wanted to share that as I use that product to bring my pH down, I actually had a rain event that stopped me from spraying that load off, and I had to let it sit there. And 5 days later, I came back, measured the pH. He just highly recommend a digital pH meter, get them on Amazon, $65, $70, something like that. So he measured the pH of that solution. 5 days later, in that batch, was still 6.0, had no change at all 5 days later. So you can rely on these products to not only get you to where you need to go, but if something occurs, you're not going to have any issues later on, putting more product in, having issues mixing, any of those things.
Absolutely. And I've never thought of this. I've been, doing these meetings forever. Tyler, here's something I want you to think about. First of all, let me say this. Number one, citric acid will lower the pH, but it will immediately start to creep back up.
Yep.
And I think I just figured out why. Is it true, Tyler? Do we ever run across micronutrients that they chelate with citric acid? Is that a true statement?
Yes, it is.
So would it make sense to you that if we put citric acid in water, and especially if we didn't use ammonium sulfate, that citric acid is going to react with that magnesium, that calcium, whatever's in that water, it's going to tie it up. And now all of a sudden the citric acid is no longer available, and that pH is going to do what?
Yep, going to creep back up.
It's going to creep back up.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great point.
I can't believe I had never thought of that. But guys, that's the deal. And let me say this, at least citric acid is a weak chelator. I don't know how long it would last, but we know it's not a very good chelator. But we also know it's not a very good acidifier. So that's the bottom line. But so there's some things. So now we go into a pre-emerge program, and we have a surfactant that we really like for that does a lot of things. I'm not going to get into that today, but I want to talk post-emerge because that's where most of your dicamba was going.
Yep.
We have this product. It's 100% active ingredient, not IS.
Yep.
Kayla was always my science nerd, did all kinds of experiments. I'll never forget her first experiment in our old garage. And she came in and she got 2 competitive products, one that was touted as being quite a bit better than ours, one that was touted as being quite a bit cheaper than ours. And so, well, this will be interesting. She did a Draves test. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with that, you take a piece of yarn, you put it in a container of water, and you measure how long it takes the water to soak into the yarn and make the yarn sink.
Yep.
So with nothing in it, Tyler, with just straight water, it'll take about 4 minutes. Okay. When she used our surfactant, it was like 1 minute and 58 seconds. So it went down really, really fast.
Yep.
The second best product took just under 4 minutes. So it basically didn't perform any worse than straight water, but it wasn't much better, just a few seconds faster, but at least it did do something. The third product that was touted as being really inexpensive, it actually sat in our garage for 30 days. I'm not going, no, I will not name the product. It sat in our garage for 30 days. It never did sink the yarn.
Yep.
This is mind-boggling to me. I don't understand how it can exactly reverse the effect you were looking for. But I'll tell you this, Tyler, in 30 days, it grew the coolest mold experiment you'd ever seen. I don't know how long it would have sat there. We threw it away because I knew I was going to spill it sooner or later. But our product, just in the Draves testing, tests out better than anything else. It's actually half as expensive as the product that's touted as being better, but isn't.
Yeah.
And then they do a second test, Tyler, where they do basically a spreader, and you put water down on basically on plastic with a grid on it of squares, if you will, like graph paper, and you see how far the surfactant will make the water spread and run. And we are yet to find anything that will come close to making this spread out, make those bubbles reduce the friction, let the water reduce the friction, actually spread out. So, guys, here's the thing. We don't want you to be scared. We want you to have the confidence to say, hey, maybe we go back to our old chemistries and use them correctly. We buffer the water. We sequester the minerals. We use the right surfactant, and we don't cheat on the rate. We use a full rate. And I think we can have some pretty fantastic results. What's your opinion?
No, I agree completely. The biggest thing is, and I do love how you said go back to our old chemistries. I am telling you right now, there is nothing new. They're just rebranding some of this stuff and relabeling stuff. So get a hold of that herbicide classification chart. One of the guys that I used to work with, a very, very intelligent man, owned the chemical wholesale company that we're reselling for, has a great business. His name's Eric. And he said this. He said, what you need to do is you need to go to that chart. You pick out 4, 5, 6 herbicides from different group classifications, and then you build your program off of that. And that's what we need to be doing. The other side of that is that when you look at adjuvants, generally, Rod, you're staring at a pint per 100, quart per 100. They have these very high use rates. When you look at like that non-ionic surfactant that you just talked about, the use rate on that product can be as low as 1 ounce per 100 gallons. That's where we always say, and I'll probably screw this up, so you have to help me out, but we always say, look, we may not be the cheapest per gallon, but we'll always be the most cost effective per acre. And that's where it counts.
Absolutely. And Tyler, we didn't really touch on this, but while we're looking at the acidification, we probably better be looking at compatibility. One of the things that I've seen when we take these old chemistry, it's one thing to take an old chemistry. It's another thing because we have a whole group of people who aren't our age. You're quite a bit younger than I am. Congratulations on turning 40 this year. I'm not going to talk about.
Not yet. I'm still in my 30s.
I know. In these next 89 days, you're going to savor that.
Yes.
But anyway, and I'm well beyond 40. But I look at young people coming out of school, and they think they've got something new. And all they've done is they've taken 3 old things that we had when I was 25 years old and mixed them together. That's not new. Okay. But what we do create is mixability trouble.
Yes.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of things. I'm going to bring up old chemistries. I was fortunate enough that I'm old enough that we use things like Blade X and Lasso and these older products. We're still using them to this day. They're just called something else or pre-mixed in something else. And we start mixing that with atrazine and water, and you get all this and that and the other thing in there. Sometimes we're going to create putties or slurries, or we always try to relate trying to mix oil and water. It's very difficult to mix an oily solution or something with a lot of clay base in it and mix it with water with just using agitation to get that done. So again, we've got this compatibility agent that I know that it works curatively, but I would highly recommend you use it preventatively. It's much more cost effective using it before you need it, and the use rates are a lot lower to use it before you need it.
Well, and as an added bonus, what we find out is it isn't that we make putty or that we make jello or that we make solid block. What we really create is operator anger.
Yes.
And the prevention of operator anger is far greater than the curative value of that.
Yes, absolutely. And that's one of the nice things that, again, we at these programs, we talk about the adjuvant lineup that we've got and how strong it is. We do some demos and we take some oil and we take some water and we try to agitate it, and you just watch the separation occur immediately. And then we'll just take a splash of this product, this compatibility agent, and then all of a sudden everything is combined into one mixture. And it's phenomenal to see that kind of work done. But we also know that there are products out there that really aren't truly what they say they are. You kind of brought up how that one non-ionic surfactant really didn't work. And there are many, many adjuvants out there that ultimately just want to piggyback on some of these higher quality. They're hoping that the Cortevas and the BASFs and the Bayers of the world are going to add enough emulsifying agents, and they're going to add enough stuff into that herbicide that you can kind of throw in that junk adjuvant and you really can't tell, whether it worked or not. And that's how they're getting a lot of this stuff into that system. It's crazy. I found one guy asked me, because I have a lot of these questions. He goes, "Hey, Tyler, have you ever heard of this adjuvant?" I said no, but again, I always have my herbicide classification chart. The other thing, if you're taking notes, go to cdms.net, look up the labels. And Rod, it was a beautiful adjuvant that had the characteristics of a non-ionic surfactant and burning effect of a seed oil. And it was a compatibility agent, and it was a drift aid, and it also was a liquid AMS. It had 5 characteristics all in one. And I said, well, how do you know how much you need of those individually to make it work? And he goes, what are you talking about? I said, well, for instance, pH. What's the pH of your solution? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, if your pH is different than Farmer Joe's down the road, do you really need as much in there, or does he need more? Well, that's a good point. Well, what about that liquid AMS that it uses? Is his water harder than your water? Well, yeah, that's a good point. I really don't know. So a lot of these companies will package, oh, it's so great, Rod. We have this all-in-one product that you can use that's going to work over every acre across the entire United States. And all of us are just going to have a big kumbaya at the end of the day and be happy with it.
Will there be marshmallows?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
If you're paying for them.
There you go. So, well, we see a lot of surfactants that do work. They do help. So we don't want to lead you down a path here, because a lot of them do. We just feel like when we're doing this, we're not looking for good. We're not looking for better. We're looking for best.
Yep.
We're looking for best. And the situation, what you just talked about, from my standpoint, the real problem there is maybe I need a whole lot of AMS, and therefore I put in way too much of this product and I get my pH too low, which is equally bad.
Yeah.
Or maybe I don't have many minerals, but I have a high pH and I use a lot of it to get my pH where it needs to be. And now all of a sudden I got a lot of extra AMS in there floating around, or worse than that, I end up with too much of a drift retardant.
I'm going to ask you this because I know your answer, because I tell your story all the time. That product had a drift aid in it.
Yep.
If you want to find out, hey, I need this much of that one product to properly condition my water, what happens, Rod, as you increase a drift aid in your total solution?
Well, my experience would prove, and I did this once, I used too much drift aid, and my spray pattern was really bad. It just came out as a really gooey stream. It wouldn't even break apart. It just went all the way from the spray nozzle to the ground, and it just looked like it was hanging there. And that's my point. We don't want to have too much of a drift aid in and get ourselves in trouble where we end up with no pattern at all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're 100% right. We're not trying to put fear into anyone's heart, but you just have to ask the question, why? Do your own research. Now, would there be an opportunity for someone if they were open to it? Would there be an opportunity to come listen more about kind of what we do?
Yeah, I actually, we'll wrap this thing up here, and I've got something I want to say in conclusion in a minute, but I would encourage people, reach out if you're interested in doing that. Just come and take a look at 2 days information, see what you can pick up that'll help you be more profitable, because that looks like the best way for me, from my perspective, to give you the opportunity to decide what you want to do.
This is literally what I'm going to say, and I wrote it down when you first started, is that I just want to ask you as a listener of this podcast, would you be opposed to improving your yields or even increasing your profits? If you would be open to that, if you're not opposed to improving yields or increasing profits, just reach out. It's so easy. Rod puts his number all over everything on social media. You can get a hold of us and we'll absolutely get back with you and get you to another one of these events.
Absolutely. I just, guys, as we recap here, we know that we could look at this as an overwhelming problem, that we can't figure out what we're going to do in the absence of dicamba. How's this going to work? What are we going to do? And I just, again, we're here not to bring fear, but to bring hope. I don't like the fear mongers. And the fact of the matter is, I don't see anything to be afraid of. I just see the opportunity to say, okay, we got a little situation, but we have a solution. We have a solution. We can go back. We're going to have to do things a little different. And sometimes it comes into that thinking thing, but we have the solution. And the bottom line is, all we got to do is take the right action. We go back in here, we download your chemical sheet.
Yep, herbicide classification chart.
That's right. We get those classifications. Then we figure out how we got to sequester the minerals.
Yep.
Then we figure out how it is that we're going to get that pH correct. And then all of a sudden we use the right surfactant and we're going to have great results. It's really that simple. So guys, if you're interested more on this, get to us. Guys, thank you for listening. Hopefully you found some value. Hopefully you found some things you can implement here to make your life better. And as we close each episode, we really do hope you're having a better day.
You're listening on the Verbal Crowd Network. Find more great shows at verbalcrowd.com.